Hi, my name's Holly, and this is my monthly check-in for my rereading of 2020. So this is a check-in at the end of April. It's 4 days. May the 4th be with you. It is 4 days into May now. And first of all, wow. Let's take a second. I can't believe it's already May. Coronavirus is crazy. And wow. Now that we have that out of the way, maybe we can, focus on what we are here to do. In case you're unaware, I'm spending my reading year of 2020 rereading some of my favorite series. The beginning of April, I was starting Harry Potter. Part of what got me through this so quickly was I was racing through these books with my boyfriend Tam, and he basically won the whole thing. I won a couple of books, but we were jockeying back and forth, but he beat me. I went into a bit of a reading slump towards the end of the month, and I just kind of stopped reading the last book. So he won. But it did help me get through the series very, very quickly, and I enjoyed it a lot, and it was a lot of talking about Harry Potter, watching some of the movies. It was grand. The first book that I read, obviously, was The Philosopher's Stone, or for any Americans, The Sorcerer's Stone, and I have 4 copies of that book, so since part of my rereading journey is to make use of the books that I physically own, I wanted to go through these books and actually read from each of them. So I went through just chapter by chapter, cycled through all the books, then I would come to the 4th book. The 4th edition of this book, let me clarify. So I raced through the first book pretty quickly. I have reread the first book many times, just through rereads of the series. I also studied it in a fantasy lit course, so I read that book and I wrote an essay on it, so I was through it quite frequently. I'm very familiar with the first book, and I love how simple and how young the audience is meant to be in the first book, and getting from that point to the end of the series where it's like no longer middle grade feeling lit is so cool. I love growing up with a series, and I love watching the series grow up. You can tell with its readers, even as an adult reader, going into a middle grade book, seeing how young it is at the beginning and then how different it is by the end of the series is really, really cool. I mean, there are kids growing up with that. The series grows up with them. I just love that element of middle grade series when they grow up with their readers. On to the second book, Chamber of Secrets. I do have 2 editions. From here on in, my books start to fall apart. So I have pages that come out of this one. The spine is completely busted. She's a hurting book. I did read a little bit from this book, but it is very battered, and I'm very worried about losing the pages, so mostly I read from this edition, which I have actually never read before. My sisters bought me this edition when they saw how broken this one was, and I'd wanted to reread this book and couldn't because I was terrified of taking it with me on a road trip. And so they got me this edition after the road trip, which was very, very sweet of them. And as well, I added in flipping through the pictures of this book. For Prisoner of Azkaban, I did flip through the illustrated edition a little bit, but mostly I was reading from my one regular size, non-illustrated edition copy. It's really here that you start to see how the series is growing up. Like, you see the language change a little bit, but you start to see it change, I think, rather a lot by this book, and just the tone starts to get a little more serious. Everything starts to get a little heavier. It's this point in the series that I have reread, because I reread the illustrated editions as they came out. The last 4 books in the series, I have not reread for years. My editions simplify to this point in the series. I only have 1 copy of each of the next 4 books. We then move on to Goblet of Fire, and it was wild going back to this. I was trying to figure out the last time I read these books, and I think, and I could be wrong, I might not be remembering right, but I know I reread them for the last book coming out. I can't remember if I reread them for the last movie coming out. I think I did, but I'm not sure. So sometime before 2010 was the last time I read these books. So it's been about 10 years since I've read the last 4 books. And it was so weird going back to them, like in the best way. It was really, really joyous going back to this. As well, the 4th book is where I'm guessing they started taking her books a little more seriously, and she got, a better editor. And she really put a lot more of the story into it. There was a lot more going into this whole series, and this is where the whimsy ends. Like, there's still a little bit of whimsy trailing out through the series. Hogwarts just can't help but be a little whimsical. But with this, whimsy fades. We get Voldemort. Voldemort's back by this book. And then also, I have, my name written in, pencil crayon here. And then Written again down here with the date of May 2002. I think also from the point of book 4, it's where we also see the flip from middle grade to more of a YA content. With these two books, and I think in particular with the 4th book, we get the turn of the series being geared towards, you know, the middle grade audience. Not to say that the rest of the series isn't suitable for the middle grade audience, but the age of our prime reader definitely shifts, I think, to teenager. And it's something I don't think I noticed a lot as a kid, was this growth in the series as a whole. Like, I just remember really, really liking the series. And I started the books when I was in middle grade age and finished it when I was a teenager. And so I really did grow up with this series. So of course, after Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix, it was at this point, I was having so much fun just staring at the covers. I had so much joy holding these books again and getting physical memories of when I had read these as a little kid. I remember sitting on the top bunk of my bunk bed, because I was spoiled and had my own bunk bed, with my cat, Sassy, and being really scared of Voldemort in that book, and having to come down and read the parts that ever mentioned Voldemort with my mum in the room. And then going back up and cuddling with my cat again. And I remember getting this book, and I'd really wanted Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and I was supposed to get, my parents did a thing where if we got good grades for the year, then we got a sort of end of the year gift to encourage us to get good grades. And so I had asked if I got good grades, could I please get a big stack of Yu-Gi-Oh cards? And my parents were like, and they got me Harry Potter, and I was very disappointed because I was a fickle child. But I remember, I think it took me like a month after getting it to stop being angry enough to finally read the book. I am so glad that they got me this. Like, I still think it's a little mean that my sisters got to decide what they wanted and I didn't. But petty disputes aside, I loved this book. And Harry Potter was really just at its height by the time this came out. And I think my name's in the cover. Yeah. Oh, it says, "To Holly, love Mommy and Daddy, 2003. Like, written in there because my parents used to write stuff like that. This copy is also rather battered. Like, I remember staring at the statue in the back, wondering what was going to happen. And there was just a physical sense of holding this big fat book in my hand that every time I did, I just felt a rush of warmth to my heart. And then, you know, things start getting darker and we move on to the Half-Blood Prince, which is falling apart. Like, she's shredded. She was a little hard to read because of that. I remember getting this book. I have a poster somewhere that I got with this book. I remember getting up really early and going with my mom to the store so we could buy this book. We went there and it was just, it's so visceral, this memory of going to this department store and going to get this book and having it, and the second I paid for it, opening it up and beginning to read. And yep, because they came out at the end of the school year, I got this for good grades. 2005. Good marks, Holly. Love, Mom and Dad. This one is in the best shape of any of my original editions. Deathly Hallows. This one took me a long time to get through, considering the rest. Just, I hit a slump. I was supposed to go to England this month and see my boyfriend, and that didn't end up happening. And by the time I got to this book was the days I was supposed to be in England, and I just was in a miserable mood and I was very upset, and my heart was hurting. And well, getting back to reading Harry Potter helped pull me out of it. I couldn't read, I couldn't focus on anything for a few of those days, so I did not technically finish this book until the beginning of May. I finished it yesterday, May 3rd. I'm counting it in this wrap up since it's taken me this long to film. I finished Harry Potter because I just want to wrap up and talk about Harry Potter and have a clean start for May. Physical experience with these books, so heartwarming. Even editions that I've never read before, it was just exciting. Going through like that Hufflepuff edition, there was like extra Hufflepuff stuff and interesting facts, and I liked going through that. I like looking at the pictures. I like holding my original books that I read as a little kid and seeing my writing in some of them and seeing the little notes from my parents, and just the physical sense memory of holding and smelling these books and seeing I found dog hairs from like my old dog in these books, and I found crumbs, and I found pencil marks, and just these books are so battered, but they bring me so much joy. This is the series that got me into reading, and I cannot believe how much joy, and I mean that in the truest sense of that word. This series brought me so much joy this month with all the uncertainty and stress and chaos and craziness that COVID-19 brought. Harry Potter was like the exact opposite force. As a reading experience of coming back as an adult, I am 27, and reading these as an adult, especially the last 2 books. I don't think I was dumb as a teenager. Like, I understood how grave and serious and dangerous everything that they were going through was, and what, you know, these wizards were doing, but there was something heavier reading it this time through. And I think part of it is just our current social and political climate gave a lot of weight to these books and a lot of what was going on. It's really not that hard for a government to suddenly be the bad guys, and for people's opinion to be swayed by the media, and for history to be rewritten, and for schools to be used in these, like, it's just felt so much more sinister as an adult than it did as a kid. And I think perhaps as a kid, even as a teenager, because I was not nearly as woke as a lot of teenagers are today, I think it being in a fantasy book, it distanced it a bit more to me. It didn't feel very real. And now I look at these and I realize that, magic aside, this is all a possibility. This is stuff that can happen. Your government can change, your history can change, the, you know, progress that you think your society is driving towards can be changed, can be switched. And that is such a dark and scary and sinister knowledge to have. Like, it's not that I didn't know that, but these books highlighted it and showed that. So even while they brought a lot of joy, and being with these characters again and these plots and going through it again and getting more out of it and coming out with more conspiracy theories and poking at plot holes and stuff and having all that joy, the last books were darker. I also went into the series wanting to examine the character of Albus Dumbledore and how I felt about him. Now, many people love to hate Albus Dumbledore. After rereading the series with an open mind, trying to decide how I felt about Dumbledore, I have come away from this believing that Dumbledore did the right thing. He may have used Harry to be the one to go through the Horcruxes and end Voldemort, but he used Harry because when Harry landed in his care as a 1-year-old baby with no parents, his lot in life was that he had a piece of Voldemort's soul inside of him, and Dumbledore gave him the most precarious and least probably thought possible chance to survive, and it worked because Dumbledore is a clever man. And I think he did the right thing by Harry because he loved him, and he tried, you know, there's that conversation that what he believed was for the greater good was not good for Harry Potter himself. Harry Potter had a piece of Voldemort's literal soul in him. Dumbledore could have killed him as a baby, so that way there was one less Horcrux in the world, or he could have killed him later. There was still the fact that Harry Potter had to die. Harry Potter had to die, and Dumbledore gave him the best chance possible to survive. People seem to forget that Harry Potter himself was a Horcrux. And even though Dumbledore knew he had to put this complex plot into motion with all these intricate pieces and information to get to Harry Potter to where he needed to be by the end of the last book, he still almost fudged the plan. He says that in, what, the 5th book? That Harry should have known the truth so much earlier on. That he should have told him sooner, but that, you know, he was too young. He had too much happiness in that moment and deserved it. That he had too much to look forward to. And Dumbledore didn't want to be the one to ruin that. And he almost let his love for Harry Potter cloud the plan that was necessary to stop Voldemort and to hopefully save Harry. Just saying. I just want to make a note, I did also get a start on in the middle of the month for the next series that I want to reread. So I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I don't want to talk about it here. I'm going to save that conversation for when I read the rest of the series, which is going to be this month. and hopefully. And so I just want to make a note that technically I read that in April. Discussion on Narnia shall follow next month. I have no interest in talking about anything else but Harry Potter at the minute. Harry Potter was the most perfect thing to read this month. I don't know what's happening. I'm apparently supposed to be going back to work next week, but they keep changing their answers and keep pushing it further and further back. That may happen again. I might go to work next week. I have no idea. So everything's up in the air. This month was weird and chaotic, and as you know, it was for everybody. And Harry Potter was the absolute greatest, bestest, perfectest thing that I could have possibly read this month. And I am so glad that I did. I am so glad that I decided to reread these books. Like, my love of reading is soaring right now. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you next time. Bye. Harry Potter.